So hello everyone. Let's go with the first lecture of the within the Next Level Esports Discord community. Welcome to you all. Maybe for just like a quick introduction. You guys have just like met with one another. So my name is Donny. I'm from Next Level Esports, and I do these type of lectures to provide free value of content, hopefully for you guys. To reach the next level within your coaching or within your team by getting the people side of esports right. So I'm a type of coach that would say focuses on human aspects, collaboration, like the lecture of today, motivation, how to act with different personalities, etc., and not, let's say, interfering with tactical or strategical stuff. I'm slightly a bit nervous because this is the first time, of course, just like everyone else in the first time. So this is a new way to present content because I always do it in a safe environment, just like the camera, and I can do retakes over and over. But I practiced quite a lot the last couple of weeks, so I'm pretty sure it will go okay, all right. So I have something prepared for you with some sheets and everything else. I also just add a lecture workshop text channel. So if you got any questions, you can post them there. And perhaps for Vampy, as long as you are here, if there are questions, because I only have 2 screens, because I probably will be looking at something else as well. If there are some questions, maybe you can give a signal so I can answer that question, if that is okay with you.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So let's jump in. So today, what I would like to set a goal is how we can motivate our players and teams. So we have different types of today's lecture. So types of motivation, your influence on motivation in the brain, so you understand on a basic level what happens as well within the brain and how does it work and how can you use the functions of the brain as well in a basic way. And of course, at the last, it all comes together, how to keep your players and team motivated. So it was set up as a lecture, so oftentimes a lecture is just like talking or just me talking, but I also like to interact if people are there. So if you got questions, or I will be asking questions as well, or just to engage you guys to have a more active learning experience, to use the knowledge basically that I present. I think that is a good way to engage with one another and to learn as well. So I just got a message. Okay. All right. So, okay. So let's continue with the first one. What types of motivation there are? So there are specific types of motivation, and it consists of 3 pillars. The first one is obvious, that is the no motivation. Well, probably we've all been or known someone in an active team, or the stories about someone that just isn't, let's say, movable. There's no regulations. The intention to do the activity almost is not there. Maybe he does it because I'm here, but there's no intention to actually do it, right? So you can compare to going to the gym for the first time. It's a big mountain in your mind that you have to climb to overcome it. So then the next pillar is extrinsic motivation, and these are triggered by impulses from the outside. It's not coming from you within yourself, because this is the third pillar, that is the intrinsic motivation. So let's deep dive a little bit more into extrinsic motivation, and then we move up to the right towards the best way to have motivation in its sense. So from the left is, let's say, no motivation, moving up to the right with more motivation as well. So first off, we have external regulation, and that is avoidance of punishment or obtaining a reward. So this could be like, oh, I just want to be on time on the scrims because I don't want to get fined, because that is a rule. Like, you are coming on time because you don't want to get fined, because there's a punishment involved. Or I play League of Legends or PUBG because it's easy money on the tournaments. And that is just like obtaining a reward, but there's no real intrinsic motivation towards like playing the game. You're not loving the game. It's just like to obtain something, to move towards a reward. So then we move over to the introjection, where it is about avoidance of feeling ashamed and or embarrassment, or keeping a sense of self-worth. So I go into the practices and I show up, or I actually only want to practice 2 times a week, but I show up for practice 4 times a week because I don't want to let my teammates down. This is a sort of introduction that we are talking about. Or I do my homework that the coach gave me because I feel like that is what is expected of me. Else I feel ashamed by not doing it, or I feel embarrassed that I am the only one of the team not doing the homework or the task that the coach presented to me. So if that is the case, we're talking about introjection of motivation. Then we move up further, and now we come to the identification, and that is a motivation to assign personal value towards the activity. So it's a little bit confusing with the integration, but we come to that soon. But hear me out. So the first one is assign personal value towards the activity. So that means it supports it supports what I know what I'm gonna get from it. So I'm gonna do my homework that the coach gave me, although I'm not really that motivated, but I know it will help me in my career becoming better or be more critical about my own gameplay. I work with my teammates, even though I don't really have a friendship with them, but because I know that I cannot reach my goals alone. So I have to engage with them, have to communicate with them the proper things that we've practiced in the practice, basically. So those are some examples of identification. Or just like a gym example as well. I go to the gym because I know it is healthy for me. I know it gets me more fit, or it gets me more eyeballs of the women, or for or the men in terms when I work out. So these are like, you know what you're gonna get out of it, and you value what you're gonna get out of it. So that's why you do it. So the last one of the extrinsic motivation is the integration. The activity fits in seamlessly with your own value pattern. So now we're talking about who do you identify with? Who are you? Who do you like to be? So this is where the confusion comes in. It's not about the identification of who you are, but the integration that is also integrated because that is who you are. So an example of this is, I am a professional esports athlete. Therefore, I take care of my body, mind, and soul, and I go to the gym 3 times a week. So it's not like, oh, it makes me healthy, but I'm a professional esports athlete, and in order to perform, I know this is the thing that I have to do to perform well, because this is basically how I am. Or if you take it a little bit smaller, I identified myself as a team player, and therefore I always listen to what my teammates have to say. Or I am a leader, and therefore I always hold others accountable because they feel like they are a leader in itself. Or for perhaps you guys as a coach, I am a coach, and therefore I try to do my best in order to make the team work together, like scheduling outgame activities, doing personal talks. That might not be the most fun experience for you. It could be, depends on who you ask, obviously. But they're also always, with any job or with any ambition that you have to do some tasks that you don't like, but you do them anyway because that is what is expected. That is how you feel like you should behave. And that is basically the integration part of the motivation or extrinsic motivation pattern. And that is the closest one to the intrinsic motivation. So the last one, I think that is the motivation that we all can relate to when regards to for you two guys that are in the lecture. that you love or started to play the game because you love the game. You love to work with players because you like to work with people, etc. Want to learn things, and it goes, let's say, naturally, organically. The activity in itself gives satisfaction and pleasure. So this is not only for you, it is for everyone, and not only correlated with sports, but just like in day-to-day life as well. So before moving forward, to make sure, because I may be going a little bit quick, but I hope to be giving enough examples so you have a little bit of a thing to latch on so you can implement it for yourself. Just checking, like, do you guys have any questions on until this moment? If you got any questions, just pop it into the hashtag lecture workshop text channel, or maybe just like you can also share a story, just like something that you witness about the player, or you're confused a little bit, or you're thinking like, oh, I have this type of situation now and I'm not sure in what kind of pillar it fits, or what specific type of motivation, or maybe you already had an eureka moment and feel like, oh yeah, this is something that that is probably going on with this type of player. But this is only the how to recognize it. And when you want to solve problems, it's always good to recognize a problem first. So that is why I put this up, so you can recognize different types of situations. So I see one is typing. So maybe before I move on, how do these motivations line up with team dynamics? For example, forming, storming, norming, and performing. Yeah, that's a good question. It is not connected towards the team dynamics because, well, it depends on the context, right? Because the model in itself is not really connected, it's separate. But like the reality, it can be. So when you are, let's say, in a forming phase, and for the people that are new with team dynamics, so yeah, 4 phases. It's forming phase when you are within a new team. And so you start to form a team, let's say the honeymoon phase, everyone is polite, everyone is friendly. Then the storming phase, that you know, like, you cannot be polite all the time. You see differences in people, in play style, how you engage with one another. And then you have the norming phase of like, okay, we have differences, but how can we resolve them? What kind of rules and things can we implement, and what kind of processes do we stick onto as a team to move forward that we can all agree on? And then we have the performing phase when we're basically self-steering and self-doing the motivation part and getting everyone on track and knowing what goals we want to achieve, so everything runs smoothly. So that's basically in a nutshell for the storming or the team dynamics. So it can happen in every phase. So if you, let's say, are an introvert and you are really shy with meeting people in the first phase of forming, then you can be avoidance or punishment. Like, you say the necessary thing, but you are afraid of maybe punishment, of, let's say, afraid of someone else's opinion, or does he like me, yes or no? Or it could be like, oh yeah, I want to integrate it because I want to be a team player. So in the first forming phase, I want to present myself as very social. So that is what I do. That is my identity. So integration, motivation kicks in, and I do my best to contact and bond with my teammates in the first phase. And it goes for every phase. So the storming phase could also be like, oh, I don't want to give my criticism, because I want to avoid feeling bad as well. And the same goes for some people, maybe for the intrinsic regulation, like I like to have conflicts and debates about what is right for the team. So it really depends on the person and the whole context in the full picture, if that makes sense. So then I hope that answers a little bit of the question. So if there's more specific context that you want to talk about, there's opportunity to just ask the question and I will answer when you post it. So let's move on. Also, to to engage you guys a little bit. So active learning. So I posted the table here in the lower part of the presentation. So where should this be? And you can just type it in the lecture workshop text channel. I play the game because I earn easy money with tournaments. I already used some examples, but just like to get you active, to connect some parts of your brain. So you need to reproduce something, and that's a better learning experience. So if you got anything, what do you think? Where it is? External. Yes, the external regulation, 100%. The avoidance of punishment or obtaining a reward. The money is the reward, so I play the game because I earn money. So that doesn't really sound like, okay, he's super motivated. He's only motivated because of the money. So the motivation of obtaining a reward, for sure. Yes, emoji, let's go. So the next one, I love to play the game and play with my teammates almost daily. So what does it sound like? What type of motivation? Is that zero? Is it within the extrinsic motivation, or is it the intrinsic motivation? What do you guys think? Take a couple of seconds and just like look at the table. The answers what we talked about. Yeah. All right, people are typing. The brains are working. Let's go. Now it kind of starts to more feel like a workshop with some interaction, but for me personally, that works the best. So sounds like either integration or intrinsic. All right, sounds like either integration or intrinsic. Intrinsic because of the love part. All right, or actually identification maybe. All right, so let's crack in the answer. So the answer is intrinsic motivation in this regard. The activity in itself gives satisfaction and pleasure. So when someone says, I love chocolate, it's not because, oh, I eat chocolate because I'm a fat person. It's when they say, I love it because it gives satisfaction or pleasure. So these are some things, if people are using also these words of love, or I super enjoy it to play with teammates or do a specific exercise inside the game of warming up or popping headshots or going into the practice tool, and they say like I love it or I really like it, then there's a good chance it's more into the intrinsic regulation. So those are some things to look out for. So the third one is I'm a professional athlete, so I do a proper warm-up before every practice. So what do you guys think? So they already, this person is saying like, yeah, it's part of the job. And don't get confused with the two that I've mentioned before, because, all right, both are close. One is saying the identification, one is saying intrinsic. And the third one is a charm, and that is integration. Yes, it is the activity fits seamlessly with own value pattern. So they see themselves as a professional athlete, and because they are a professional athlete, they do a proper warm-up before every practice. So I know one of the coaches does stretches and working out, just like with the team with the webcams on, that is here. And we do this because we are professional esports athletes. you need to have, let's say, blood flowing. You need to, let's say, take care of your wrists and your posture check. It's all beneficial for the health and also the mind as well. So we do this not because there's a reward to it, or not only alone. It could be that some players see like, yeah, I know what is up. Or some players don't have to do it. But I know the coach at least does it because he likes to do it himself personally, but maybe sometimes it can also be like, yeah, we do this because we are professional athletes. So he also gives, let's say, the right example how to behave, be a role model in terms of activities and what we do. So, and that is, I think, the misperception of the identification. That is the only tricky part, that because I identify as a personal athlete, but in the theory, this is not the same. So it confused me as well in the beginning. So then we move on to the next one. I do the tasks that my coach give me because I don't want to let him down. So which one didn't we got? All right. You are very fast. Introjection, 100%, because the avoidance of feeling ashamed and or embarrassed or keeping a sense of self-worth. So 100 points for Gryffindor there. So good stuff. Yes, indeed, introjection. And then I believe the last one. I practice my reaction time because it will make faster than my. Obviously, there needs to be make me faster than my opponent. So typo. What should this be? We haven't had this one before, so it's just like deducting. Practice my reaction time because it will make me faster than my opponents. All right. You're on the roll. Yes, identification, assign personal value towards goals. Doesn't mean necessarily that he likes to practice this, but I practice my reaction because it will make me faster than my opponents. Because this person, if this would be a quote, is he knows what the end result will be after the exercise, after going to the gym, after doing the warm-up, or after reviewing their own game. So that's why he does it. Perfect. So, and then the last and also probably least is, of course, I am physically here, but mentally my mind is not there. I do my minimum effort on this task. So we're talking obviously as no motivation. All right, so these are some things to practice with. So now we go into the influence on the motivation, because that is basically the reason why you guys are here. So why or how can you influence the motivation of the players or the team in general? The first one is autonomy, able to make independent decisions. I can decide how I execute certain play setups or play heroes, champions, make rotations, have a sense of freedom that they can do something out of their own interest or their own ideas. So not everything is set in stone, because sometimes I see that coaches can be very strict, or like, okay, we can do, we're gonna practice this and I only want to see this. Well, this can work, let's say for one practice in an, let's say, a very solid environment to confine it and really practice on that one thing, and that can be effective as well, but it shouldn't be contained for all the time. Players like to make their own decisions if they like to play or pick a certain champion, if they feel and think this is the best way. Example is for the League of Legends players, just like Caps picking in Vayne mid, for example, like, yes, this is the perfect play, and everyone is like, oh, are you sure? Like, we don't know for sure, but if you want to pick this, we give you the autonomy to pick it. And so if they say yes, and also a bit of trust with one another, he feels motivated, and the team as well, that everyone can have their freedom and their own way of learning and executing upon things. So the second one is the relation. is I feel at ease with my team. I have a sense of belonging. So this is very important and sometimes overlooked because it's always about the game and not really the relationships behind it. And this is a very powerful thing because I think if you're in esports for, let's say, even a year and you've looked around, you always see teams that are just breaking up, not people not connecting with one another because the relationship isn't there, and therefore they cannot compete as well and get the results and success that they eventually wanted. So it's very important and to get towards a high motivation to build on relationships as well. So even though you got autonomy right, or later on the competence right, that the level of the team feels right and everything is going well, if there's no connection, it will be also hard for players or specific players to feel motivated and to perform at their highest capability. So these are the three very important things to look out for. So the third one is competence. So that means the level of the team feels right. So not like it's like that you're stomping every team in your competition, or that you're losing every game in the scrims because everything just feels bad, or the exercises are too hard or too easy. But the exercise and task and the team are challenging and are achievable. So you still have a challenge. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but they are achievable, and you feel a sense of progression and feel a sense of competence that after you practice these things, that you feel that you are becoming better with it. And later on in this lecture, I also present to you how you can, let's say, structure your training on these things to involve this all as well, to get the motivation even higher, together with spikes of dopamine and how that works inside the brain as well. So these are the 3 points to really look out for: autonomy, be able to make independent decisions; 2, the relationship, feel at ease with my teammates, with the coach as well, and be at competence, that they have a sense that, yeah, I can achieve things even though things are challenging, but I know if I keep working at this with myself individually, or let's say the bottom lane or duo, trios, or just like with a team, that we have a sense of like, yeah, we're progressing. We have a competence level and we know we can compete with one another without only steamrolling over one team or getting beat up by every team, basically. So this is very important to keep the motivation. So if there are any questions, just feel free to jump in. So I see one is typing as well. Also at the end, there will be a Q&A as well. So that could be something. So I just move on and wait for it. The competence kind of goes along well with the flow state. Yes. And to get into flow, it's not only competence, but it depends also. It's not this type of lecture, but also the type of personality and the way what each individual needs. So I'm a more competency-driven person that likes to know things, but some other players are more focused onto the relationship. If that is right, the atmosphere in the team is right, they perform at the highest level, no matter if they have a little bit of lower competence feeling or example. So it all intertwines and works together, and every individual is different. So you need to facilitate it and recognize what your individual player needs and your team needs in general. So do it on the micro level and the meta level as well, or the macro level. So in terms of motivation inside the brain, how does it work? Let's say easy four-step thing. So first, let's say on a pick or an action that someone wants to do, is there's a thought or experience like, oh, I like to play this specific champion, or I feel like in PUBG I'm gonna move to that part, I'm gonna snipe everyone from this point if that will help me. And when we have these thoughts or experiences in the moment, it releases a dopamine thing that we thought about because we like it. It's exciting. Oh, thinking about pizza, thinking about chocolate. It's the same reaction. We get a dopamine shot and we know how good it tastes, etc. So we want it. So we get into motion. We get a good feeling already before we even execute it. And then, because we get a feeling and that we want to execute it and we know what sort of the reward is, and it can also be on an unconscious level, you're going to do it, right? So this is how motivation works in the brain. And now I only covered, let's say, the positive effect, but it also goes to the opposite side. So I know at least in esports, some games use the term dopamine hunters. So they think like, oh, I see a person, or even in PUBG or any other game, they are like, okay, that person is low health, or oh yeah, the guy is super chunked, like he only has 10 HP left. And then they have this thought or experience that they see that low health bar. That is the experience. It gets a shot of dopamine inside your brain. It gets a good feeling that you have like, oh, I have the opportunity to kill it. Then you're going to do it. Because you got the dopamine shot, you forget about the rest of your environment or the position that you're in. So you kind of also make mistakes. So it works both ways in terms of how your brain uses dopamine and motivation as well. So it's very, very good to recognize this process and to go back towards the step, okay, where does it start and what kind of thoughts come up, what kind of experience triggered this dopamine shot, and then work with that player or maybe even the team to work through it and to see, okay, are there alternatives to use this type of motivation moving forward. So this is basically in a nutshell how the motivation in the brain works. So the dopamine shot, it works something like coffee. So I'm not a coffee drinker. I discussed it. I don't know why people drink coffee, but let's say the common knowledge of coffee is when you first start using coffee, you get a real high, let's say, dopamine shot, or let's say, how is the substance called again? Nicotine, right? Or that's from a cigarette. What is it? What is that? With a C.
Caffeine.
Caffeine. Jesus, thank you so much. Caffeine. Right. So caffeine, you get a. I need coffee. Yeah, good meme. So at first, it really helps a lot. It boosts your, let's say, your alertness a lot, but then it falls off. And it is not only like with one cup of coffee, but with the continuous use of coffee. At a certain time, you need more coffee, let's say, be more alert at the same time that it was with your first 3 cups of coffee. And the same works with dopamine. So at first it spikes when you're playing a certain game. So let's say you like to go with one strategy, right? And it spikes in dopamine because you have success rate on it. But after playing the same strategy for 10 times, it doesn't excite you anymore because it just falls off, and then you have to fall, the suck, and then people quit and they're looking for something else because they are, quote unquote, sort of addicted to a dopamine. They want to get a good feeling that they have. So it also correlates to the way you coach them. And you need to change things up frequently, but not frequently enough, because there's still a good amount of dopamine that you can use on a specific subject. So when you have the fall, they can be still very effective on how you, let's say, structure your training on a specific topic, or something that you want to practice with the team. Let's say maybe for a week or maybe 2 days or a couple of hours, depending on how big the topic is. But you want to find a sort of a sweet spot, and that's between, let's say, the fall and the suck, because sometimes you need to, let's say, experience the suck a little bit and then don't want people to quit. They still want to continue, and then you present something else because they have the proper time to integrate this new tactic, this new strategy, or this new play style within their brain and within their muscle memory. So then you change things up, new dopamine shot, and then it spikes again. So you have to juggle with the dopamine and the motivation of the players on a day-to-day basis, depending, because it's not only one topic, it's also about enjoyment, relationship, autonomy, all these types of things that you want to think about. So then we move on. So this is basically just like the summary. Dopamine effect is temporary. After a while, the effect is back. So if you don't have coffee for a while, so you basically went to rehab for, I don't know, a month and don't drink coffee, then the effect is there again. Same goes for dopamine. If you do a certain type of play style or anything, you get dopamine shots, and after 10 times it sucks, it's not interesting anymore, or the meta changes and you need to change things up. But maybe after 2 months or 3 months you can come back to the same strategy and you enjoy it again. So that is basically the same thing. And also what is a very important thing, what we will continue later on, is after completing a task, you will get a shot of dopamine. And this is very important. So if that is a short task or a big task, it doesn't really matter. It releases a dopamine shot. But the more conscious you complete something, the bigger the shot. So if you know you've got a to-do list, so I got it here on my desk, I got the to-do list, and if I check something off, it feels good. Like, oh, I've achieved something now. Or what do I still need to do? Yeah, I'm always longing towards the dopamine shot. So always be sure within your practices and training, that's not only about the huge process, but also, excuse me, also small goals that players individually, sometimes you need to differentiate or want to differentiate between the tasks, between the players, but you want to have something that they can check off, something that they can complete so it feels fulfilled. So even though you have the process goal, let's say about communication, and you want to be effective, like when is this practice? And the practice is maybe 1 or 2 hours with your team or your individual player. Like, how are you gonna set those small goals as well? So it's not only being effective, but okay, in this hour, I want you at least say 5 times where the enemy is with this type of thing. And when you've done this and you trained it, then you can check this goal off, and then you know that you've improved something. And if they know that they can achieve it, but still yet challenging with the competence, the competence motivation part, then you will know that they get a shot of dopamine inside the brain, and they are more eager to continue working with you with the goals, and are more, let's say, prone to keep going, get the motion going by, let's say, climbing that mountain. Because to have a metaphor on it, if you climb a mountain and the only goal is to stand on the top, and that is the only thing that you can, let's say, achieve, and that is the only point that matters, like, then it will be really hard to get you motivated to climb Mount Everest, and with all the hassle that comes through it. But if you have like checkpoints, what they have with camps across the mountain and little set points, or all right, if we move over this canyon, then that is like basically 25%. We're at a quarter of the whole trip towards the mountain. If you know you can check that off, like, oh, I reached 25%, that feels good. It's a dopamine shot and gives momentum to keep going with the bigger goal. No matter if that's climbing, carrying, maybe sleeping for a night in a cold tent or whatever, it gets the momentum going. So that's something that you have to consider as well in your coaching. Just so, summary, set small goals and be conscious about those goals, that they can be achievable. So, how do you get the players and team motivated in general? As well of the components that we just talked about. So ensure variety. Choose a certain approach for a period and then another one for a while. So don't stick only to, let's say, communication or this specific mechanic only with, let's say, all those hours after one another. Have variety, change up the pace, change up the exercises, change up the way you look at things. How do other coaches work on the same, let's say, big goal? For example, mechanics. Is it only practicing headshots in the practice tool within, let's say, the Counter-Strike workshop that they done? Or is it also going into aim labs or setting up, let's say, creating a game with your team to practice something in a custom game? What are ways to also have variety while still working on the same goal, but also from time to time change up the goal as well, so you're working on multiple things and keep the dopamine level as high as possible? So comes down to juggling and your judgment towards what you think of the team and the players in order to what they need. So the second part is set goals in practice, what we just discussed and talked about. So short term, this practice, this scrim, what is the exercise? When are we successful in this practice? When do you feel like we have achieved something? Or when are you as a coach, if you are a coach, happy with the progress of the players? Like, obviously you want to have them to play the perfect game every time, and that's nice, and to see in that way progress, but we all know progress is not linear. It doesn't go in a straight line. It goes up, it goes way down, and then right up again. So it can be difficult, but set goals. When are you also satisfied as a coach? And if you make it small and concrete and precise, it's also much easier for you to coach upon and to focus on, instead of getting distracted by many details or any other processes going on. Know what your goals are, know what you want in the short term, and what can they check off the players, and perhaps something for yourself as well if you want to develop as well as a coach. And then the third one is completion. Give a good feeling. So be sure that your players or team can check off something every training, not every training or every other training, every training, for the extra dopamine shot. So set clear expectations, be very clear on the goals that you want to practice and how you want them to practice on it, and when it is successful for the players, when they achieve something. So it doesn't really matter if they're winning or losing, because often in esports, the focus is on winning or losing, and that is a good practice or a bad practice. But if you set these goals and you know you can take them with them by setting these small goals in between about communication, because that is a focus point, or just like a mechanical outplay, or sometimes it can help to show daring, like dare to challenge someone in a 1v1 fight, or take that shot to get someone out of the comfort zone. So if that is the goal, winning or losing doesn't really matter, because winning and losing is always a result of something, of a process, and it often deviates towards the progression as well. So check something off, and then you have better motivation as well. So this is basically the end of it. It's just like a short, concise lecture. So we're in now for 45 minutes. I rambled quite a bit after one another. So I'm curious if you guys got any questions, or maybe you guys want to share a story or a situation, or maybe perhaps you got one or two players at this moment, or that you've worked with, and you want to know like, oh, how should I handle it? I did this and this and this. Maybe I can provide you some value, but we're also within this group with other coaches and other people that want to develop as well. So maybe we can help each other. So maybe I'll just stay quiet for a sec, so you guys can maybe reach out. You can also just like unmute yourself and ask a question now, since I'm just done, so we can have a little bit of a discussion and conversation going.